What's up, everybody? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials in the description as well. And let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in today's video, I wanted to talk about the Nets because there's this question coming up about whether or not this is an elite basketball team right now. This question comes up because it was something that was asked of Steve Nash yesterday after they lost to the Warriors. And he said that right now, he does not think that this is an elite Nets team. So we're going to talk about their start to the season, things they have done well, things they haven't, and kind of where I think they're going to end up as the season progresses. So it's certainly been an up and down start to the year. Through the first handful of games, they were below 500. Then they went on a nice winning streak. But when they've played better teams lately, namely Chicago and Golden State, it has not been competitive. They've been fine in the first half, and then they've fallen apart, whether it be in the fourth quarter in Chicago or for the entirety of the second half in Brooklyn against the Warriors last night. So I'll start here, just based strictly off the game last night, because that's mostly what we're reacting to here. The Nets are not on the level that Golden State is on right now, and it's not necessarily surprising given that that's a Warriors team that has championship experience together, most notably Steph and Draymond and Steve Kerr. They have a system in place that's worked for them for a while. They had to make some adjustments, of course, when KD got there and things like that, but for the most part, they understand who they are, what they're supposed to do, and probably most importantly, there's a lot of continuity that carries over on the offensive and the defensive ends of the floor. When Steph went out of that game with foul trouble, Draymond was still able to drive really high-level offense for Golden State because he was able to get guys in the correct position, and he's just an awesome playmaker. And defensively, they have the best defensive rating in the league, and that is kind of an understated part of this run for Golden State since 2015 is they've always been, when they've been a highly competitive title contending team, one of the best defensive teams in the league, and that has continued throughout the first handful of games this season. And so whether the Nets are elite or not is something we're going to handle in a second, but they certainly are not on the level that Golden State is at, as they look just incredible to begin this season. But let's talk about some things that are going well for Brooklyn here. In my opinion, the role guys look relatively comfortable. Bruce Brown wasn't playing in the first couple of games. He's back. That effort, that energy that he provides is really critical for this team because they have a tendency to get a little bit lackadaisical, a little lazy, not have a ton of energy. I think him, Patty Mills, guys like that provide kind of exactly what this Brooklyn team needs from an energy standpoint. And you know, they're going to be relying on some of these different bigs, whether it be LaMarcus Aldridge, who from a scoring standpoint has been awesome to begin the season, or Blake Griffin, who is now just like a do-everything role player guy despite not shooting the ball well from three. And I think those guys have looked pretty much the way you would expect them to, and they look relatively comfortable. They'll get more comfortable as the season goes along, and they're starting to kind of figure out which guys they can or can't count on. And those are starting to include players like DeAndre Bembry, who I like, Javon Carter, who can do some things. As long as those guys are making shots, they'll get some minutes even on into the postseason. But if they're not, of course, that could be an issue. Kevin Durant has been out of his mind. He had a tough shooting stretch in the second half of last night's game. But in general, I mean, it feels like every time he shoots the ball, it's going in. He's been active and engaged on both ends of the floor. He's been great as a playmaker. He seems locked in. He seems like a guy that knows he has a legit chance to win a title and wants to do everything he can to make sure that this team is where they need to be by the end of the season, which is awesome to see. And there have been some improvements from game to game for this Brooklyn team. There were times in the beginning of the year where they didn't look like they had any idea what to do, Harden specifically, and they've really improved. Now, granted, there are still some troubling results like the Golden State game, like the Chicago game, like the New Orleans game where they were up 20 and then suddenly it was like a 1-point game with 2 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. But in general, improvement from game to game is a nice sign to see from a team that, you know, is still kind of trying to figure it out as a group. Now, things that aren't going well, most notably for me, even though statistically things have picked up lately, James Harden still does not look right, which isn't super surprising considering that he reportedly spent basically the entirety of his offseason recovering from the hamstring injury that he suffered in the postseason. And you can kind of tell. He looks half a step slow. He doesn't look like he is fully active, engaged, or in a rhythm. And I just don't have as much experience, you know, really locked in and paying attention on what James Harden looks like in the beginning of the season to know if this is a normal thing or not for him to kind of play his way into a rhythm in the beginning of the season. Granted, this is kind of a weird circumstance with him rehabbing that injury all off season. I still have confidence that he's going to be fine. It's just a lot of ugly basketball from him, whether it be turnovers, whether it be, I know he's an isolation heavy player, but just there's a lot of times where he's just commandeering possessions, and if he's not at his elite level of isolation scoring, it just looks really, 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 really ugly, and he's certainly not at that elite level right now. Thankfully, that's something that I expect to improve, but it is still a concern. Versatility-wise as well, I definitely have concerns about this team when it comes to being like one of the true top teams in the league. Specifically in the front court, those two things kind of go hand in hand. Apart from Blake Griffin, who doesn't have as much size as you'd like to have from someone playing the 5 spot, there's just not a lot of bigs that they have that can do a lot of different things. Nicholas Claxton can be an interesting, athletic, long, lob threat guy at the rim, but he's not going to do a ton offensively, and defensively he can still get a little bit lost. Blake is much more willing to do the little things than I ever thought that he would have been when Brooklyn brought him in, but his shot is just not falling at all, and again, he's not as big of a guy as you'd like to have as the full-time 5. LaMarcus Aldridge has been awesome offensively, but he's going to get absolutely burned defensively, and Paul Millsap just doesn't look good at all. So I'm sure they'll get some buyout guys. Maybe they'll look for a trade or two, but that definitely would be a concern for me. And interestingly, I think a lot of people would assume that at this point in the season, Brooklyn's main issue would be defense. Their inability to guard, the fact that they can't, keep these games close enough to allow their offense to really take over. They're actually 10th in defensive rating as of the recording of this video. They don't look like it, but from whatever the case may be, whether it be teams aren't making shots or whatever, they're 10th in defensive rating, and they're actually bottom half of the league in terms of offensive rating. Now, I would almost prefer it to be that way to begin the season because I know that the offense will improve, whether it be over time as they grow together as a team and gain a rhythm, or whether it be when Kyrie comes back or Harden gets healthier. That I know will improve. Them being top 10 in the league defensively would be a absolute shock to me if we get to the end of the year and they're still there. I mean, they have pieces. I mean, one of the things that makes me not really concerned about them as we get to the postseason is I believe that they can be at least an average defensive team, just strictly based off of effort and Kevin Durant like really truly locking in, because when he does that, he's potentially one of the best wing defenders in the league, not necessarily on the ball, but just in terms of his activity level and his length. So even though it's a concern that they're bottom half of the league offensively, it's almost a concern I would like to have because I know that stuff will improve. And then obviously the Kyrie thing here. With the way that Harden is playing and some of his limited effectiveness at times, it's the Kyrie's impact is obviously felt. Him not being there, the impact of that is obviously felt way more because the firepower that the Nets brought to the table was really built around always having one of those 3 guys on the floor and all of them being fresh at all times. But now they're kind of in this weird situation where it seems like Nash really wants to play Durant and Harden together. And if you do that, you're going to go some minutes without either of them on the floor, and your offense and just your rating in general is going to crater. Whereas if Kyrie was there, you would still be able to have Kyrie or Harden, or you'd just pick one of them and say, hey, you can stay on the floor. Typically, that was Kyrie and Durant playing the entire first quarter and then James Harden playing with the second unit. But obviously that is no longer an option. And the last point that I would make here is one, I don't think that Brooklyn is necessarily an elite team right now, as Steve Nash mentioned. But I think that they will be. You got to keep in mind, this is a team that has probably played, 25 games with James Harden now. I guess if you count the playoffs, that number is higher than that. But really not that many games, especially to adjust to a player that is as ball dominant as Harden. And then, if Kyrie does come back, they have barely played any games with all 3 of those guys together. So it is, as James Harden mentioned, still a very new team. It's still a team that needs to figure a lot of things out. But the one thing that definitely gives me some hope is that they seem like a team that wants to improve, that understands the goal is to win a title, to be the best team by the end of the year. And it doesn't feel like there's panic setting in. It doesn't feel like these guys are wondering what in the world is happening. The sky is falling. They just understand that improvements need to be made on both ends of the floor, and they will hopefully be more fluid. But honestly, the biggest takeaway from the game last night is Golden State is absolutely terrifying. I mean, if Steph is playing well and Clay comes back and is a good shooter and they get some of their depth back, guys like Wiseman, things like that, we're going to talk about them a little bit later in the week in terms of some moves they can make to truly go all in. But apart from these comments after the game, Steve Nash about are the Nets elite, are they not? I think the biggest takeaway is just Golden State. 1, they're fun. 2, they're back. 3, they are absolutely title contenders, and I think they know it. There's a vibe around them from Steve Kerr where he's just really, really coaching his butt off, and Draymond Green is bring in so much effort and energy. And they all feel locked in, and I think they absolutely should be because they look for real and legit. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the box on screen. Check out the links in the description as well for some of my socials if you guys want to hang out with me outside of these videos. With all those things said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.